Hey guys, welcome. This is my first Flames of War battle report. It was at Memorial Day. Um, we had a mega battle, 11,000 points to even the sides up. We did British and Americans versus Germans and Russians. We used dust up, but we modified the rules. Um, 7 objectives, 2 in each deployment zone, 3 in no man's land. To win, you had to take the opponent's one of the opponent's deployment zone and 3 in the or 2 out of the 3 in no man's land. So to win, that was the win condition. Um, and we had 4 tables set up, our deployment zones and the reinforcement corners. The measurements were doubled to allow for us to play such a big game. It is 4 tables back to back, so it's a 12 by 8 table. The corners of the table so acted as raised roads, so they were in play. So you can see that they were line of sight blocking, as well as when you got on top of it, it was a road that you could just zoom right on by. So we move on to deployment. This is the Russians and Germans. You can see the Russians were just prepared to move forward and take as many objectives as possible with the huge company that's to the far side. And you can see here we were putting down the Americans and British. This is more of a picture collection than a true battle report. There was just not enough time. We were doing too much. But here's the deployment of the Americans. They had 2 tank companies and 2 infantry companies, while the Germans were and the Russians were 1 infantry or all infantry. I think one of the Germans might have been mechanized. Here you can see in turn 1, they were measuring the distance that they could do for their guys trying to hit my Russians with all the artillery they could. My Russians ended up by turn 4 taking a pounding. Um, and in turn 1, they stretched out and the tanks just moved out to try and take as many objectives and create a battle line as much as they could. Meanwhile, their artillery just bombarded my Russians, utterly bombarded, while the Russians just moved forward, and the Germans did move to the other table edge to try and create a battle line on that for when the reinforcements came in. It's just fun looking back at uh, all these tanks. I don't think I've ever seen as many models on a table before. Here you can see the American scouts running forward, as well as the tanks coming over to try and create a battle line for that objective. Meanwhile, the Russians and Germans pretty much stay put. We do cross the far road, and our Russians keep running and take care of a sniper that isn't that church on the right of this picture. The amount of artillery that came down on that company was insane. I believe they had 16 guns, so it was the big template of 150s. And the Americans ended up being the first to take that far objective. Meanwhile, the first turn with turn 3, we had the first turn with some reserves coming in. They chose to bring in some AT guns and Calliopes, while the Germans and Russians didn't get anything on turn 3 because of delayed reserves. There's really no casualties besides the bombardment at this point. In order to move, some of us needed to get to the center of the table. We kind of had some fun ways to do that, just capturing this. On turn 4, the Americans came in and brought their tanks in. Because we doubled the line, it really became apparent, and we forgot about this as Germans ran up, and the Americans ended up just coming in and annihilating that battle line. They brought up and put their British armors up first. One of the things that they did forget was they kept forgetting to bring their airplanes in on that side, and it allowed us to use our anti-air guns as AT guns. As you can see, my Russians decided to move forward to try and take care of tanks, and it ended up needing a smoke bombardment to protect them for a couple more turns as more British just kept coming at them, more British tanks. Um, I'm surprised how long they lasted against the bombardment and the British tanks. Here you can see just all the bombardment that they had. There's so many guns in this collective. Uh, I do believe this is turn 4, where we finally have some of our Germans come in the corner, and they decide to bring their airplanes in and try and take it. Turn 5, it's just all out. Russian heavy machine guns come in. My T-34s decide to come in, and we end up assaulting and taking things. Um, so you can start seeing things really develop on that end, and their flank starting to open up like they opened up ours. Here you can see in the center just becoming a, part of my language, clusterfuck. The British end up trying to take the middle objective while we had Panzer IVs and Jagd Panthers there to kind of provide the AT, and my fearless SMG scouts ended up taking that objective and holding on to it. Meanwhile, you can see the damage that they did to our sideline. Um, our battle line that we formed on the other side just got completely bum rushed and killed, and everything that they had just came in from that corner. Um, Luckily, you can see the 88 still there. We had a few AT guns, and our mortars switched from bombarding what they could to bombarding that corner as much as we could. They kept coming in the middle with all of the British tanks, and the Jagd Panthers just had a field day with their shooting. And then I think this is turn 6. We had more come in, and we got Panzer IVs coming in and everything else coming in from the corner, trying to take uh, take control of that table and that objective, and really pounding those battle lines. As you can see, our deployment zone is now scarce with trying to reinforce that battle line to prevent the Americans from crossing the road and really coming in and wrecking the our deployment zone to try and get that objective quickly. We had to take things from the middle and bring it over. Um, and as you can see, our reinforcements just wreck what little they brought out to that to the center, and the T-34s just ignore the two bailed out tanks and just keep going, kind of helping push the way alongside some Panthers and some Jagd Panthers, just tearing up the 5 tanks in the jumbo that was just there, and anything that was deployed on that table. Meanwhile, nothing really happened in their deployment zone. It was not really. We couldn't really touch it that much. We did pick away. We did have our Storm Tigers or Storm Panthers, whatever they're called, pick away at their gun teams to lower the bombardment, as our deployment zone is just getting bombarded and bombarded and bombarded. There's way too much coming at us, so they try and quickly uh, move their 105s, the Sherman 105s, around to try and to bombard and do some damage to the incoming Russian and German influx and try and do some damage. As you can see here, we've been busy trying to stop, and there's so much damage in the far there. It's really hard to describe exactly what's happening because it's so big. Um, the there's the 88 is finally gone, and so my 3.7 anti-aircraft guns just open up, and because of how far they've moved up, they were able to get some side shots, which really helped. Um, the Panzers got some damage, and then on I think turn 8, all the Russian horde comes in. As you can see, it's just too big to put onto one corner. So we end up having one horde go, and because it's so big, I have to double time right onto the board, which kind of leaves them kind of vulnerable. But one came off in the corner, and the other came off in the far end just to try and run up, take that objective, and then go into the one in the corner goes into their deployment zone. While they tried the same tactic, except they're bringing tanks. They're bringing tanks and tanks and tanks into this, and luckily they're not putting in their air guns, so we have our anti-aircraft, which can get some side shots, as well as our Yog Panthers in the center, really taking care of not only the center, but able to kind of bring about and bring to the side some some side shots, especially since we have Panzer IVs and T-34s coming from the side, already moving towards the middle of the board. And this is turn 9, probably the final turn we had. Uh, we finally had our Germans that were in the forefront with half tracks going in and assaulting parts of the uh, parts of the deployment zone, and while they may or may not have been successful with it, I think they were, but they may not have been all that successful going in the future. Um, the Russian horde was right behind them, as well as another German platoon ready to go and ready to just assault, 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 and just not stop going. And they knew they didn't have much time. So they kept pushing. They made sure that they had control over one of them, and then one thing, and decided that, to go over the road in as many ways that they could. They finally killed off the deployed Russian company and take control over the one objective. We finished the game with that, and with this picture. No one's won, but it looks like the Russians may have won in a couple more turns. It took us about 10 hours to play the game, so we had to call it there due to the store closing. So, thanks for watching. I hope this gave some great pictures and some great narrative to kind of bring it all into pictures or bring it some story. And to those who have subscribed, you know that I end my transmissions with a little lesson learned segment, and it's such a big game. There's a lot to go over. However, the four main points I can make is you got to be aware of how far and where enemies can deploy their reinforcements. Uh, our Germans had forgotten that the battle line or the reinforcements could go 32 inches up, and they were tanks, so they could go the full 48. That was that table length, and it really made for some um, difficult battle lines. They just got onto our flank and just tore it to shreds. They got behind our tanks, and we didn't have our front armor. Um, Anti-aircraft guns can make effective AT guns in a pinch. Really, our AA guns is what saved us. The 88s, the 3.7s, they don't have much AT, only 6, maybe 9 or 10. However, because they didn't force our AA to act as AA, they were able to shoot the next turn, which allowed them to shoot at the tanks. If they had kept pounding on that section with aircraft, we may have not had a choice, spent our AA guns on the aircraft, and decided, this is the AA gun, they're going for aircraft, and we couldn't then expend our AA guns as AT guns. Um, Full Russian companies plus the AT rifle company um, attachment, 32, 32 bases in a company. It took a huge pounding. As I said, there was 4 or 5 turns where it was nonstop pounding as they were running forward. They were not in dug in. They just kept moving forward. They didn't double time, but they kept moving the 6 inches, kept maneuvering. Um, it took them till turn 7 to knock them under quality of quantity, and then even then, they kept pushing back the tank companies that were assaulting them, especially with the retard rifles. Petard, retard, same. Sorry. Um, that just can't do anything. They were actually really effective in combat with AT3, and requiring, finally, just a lesson learned about the game itself, requiring an enemy deployment zone objective made the large, long game even longer. I think we had the majority. We had four. German and Russians had 4 out of the 7 objectives, which is what we were originally going for at the beginning of turn 9. However, because we required an enemy deployment zone objective, it was going to take another couple turns, and with each turn lasting about an hour to try and complete, just because of so many dice, so much to do, so much in control, and people having to leaving their models behind. Um, the management factor of such a long game took forever. So, um, by eliminating that option, I think we would have actually completed the game rather than having to pack up at 9 o'clock due to the venue closing. So, thank you for watching once again, and I hope you learned some things. I hope you enjoyed the slideshow like I enjoyed playing the game. Good night.